That morning, the Acme Valley was as quiet as ever. As the first sunlight touched the thin layer of dew on the ground, two people walking their dog suddenly froze. Just a few steps ahead lay the still body of a young woman on the gravel path. No signs of struggle, no cries for help, no one else around. Only a chilling stillness, as if time itself had stopped right there. When they called emergency services, the trembling voice of one of them revealed something that made authorities respond immediately. What they saw did not resemble an accident. It did not look like any scene they had ever encountered, and the identity of the young woman, Darian Sather, 21 years old, only made the questions heavier. What had happened to her in the final hours of her life? Just a few hours earlier, Darian had been seen with familiar faces. No one heard a cry for help. No one saw her in any conflict. But as investigators traced every smallest detail, another truth began to surface quietly. The last people who had been with Darian were the very ones who would lead detectives to the most unexpected turn in the case. What happened inside that car? Why did the three statements contradict one another? And why was Darian the only one left without the chance to explain? Join me as we peel back each layer of this real case, one that seemed simple at first glance. Yet, the deeper we dig, the more the truth defies everything we thought we understood. Darian Sather, the young woman found lying in the stillness of that gravel road, was never meant to be just a name in an investigative report. Long before she became the victim in a case that would rattle an entire community, Darian had been an ordinary young woman with dreams that felt real, reachable, and entirely her own. She grew up in Washington, in a family that was far from wealthy, but warm in all the ways that mattered. Friends remembered Darian as someone whose smile spread easily, someone a bit introspective at times, yet always willing to listen as if no one in the world could ever be invisible to her. She loved nature, loved capturing the way sunlight threaded through the leaves, loved using colors to record her feelings in sketches that were clumsy yet full of emotion. Her family once said, Darian didn't just see the world, she felt it. But life rarely stays calm. As she stepped into adulthood, family turmoil and the weight of unspoken emotions nudged her into choices that were far from healthy. Darian wasn't misguided at heart. She was simply lost, like so many young people searching for an anchor they never quite found. Sometimes, mistakes do not come from a person's character, but from a loneliness too deep for anyone to notice. Even so, Darian was not someone who gave up. She tried to pull herself back up, tried to walk away from the things that had begun to bruise her spirit. Yet in her search for comfort, she drifted into circles of connection that carried risks she may not have recognized. Outside her family, she leaned on a few acquaintances, including her former boyfriend, Peyton Morian, someone once close, once familiar, but also someone who had left behind quiet sorrows and lingering wounds. Their relationship was like two people standing at the edge of a cliff, holding on to each other while being pulled in opposite directions. Darian saw Peyton as someone who could understand her. Peyton, however, drifted between concern and choices that only tangled things further. They broke up, then reconnected, then drifted again. A tiring loop neither could seem to escape. For Darian, familiarity sometimes softened the warning signs. To outsiders, the relationship may have seemed unstable. But to her, it was simply the last bit of hope she knew how to hold on to. Alongside Peyton was Tyler O'Keefe, his longtime friend. Tyler was the kind of person who had grown up with him, sharing childhood, teenage troubles, and all the spaces in between. His relationship with Darian was never close, yet he was always present during the moments when Peyton's life shifted. And it was this presence that later made investigators wonder, was Tyler merely caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, or did he know far more than he claimed? The third person, Brent Gerber, was the most unfamiliar name to Darian. He had no deep connection to her, no emotional history. This distance only made Brent's presence more puzzling, because his place within Peyton's circle did not seem coincidental. Someone newly introduced, yet appearing at the most critical moment. Details like that are often the earliest hints of irregularity in real cases. To those who loved her, Darian was gentle-hearted, trusting, yet far from fragile. To those on the outside, especially those who only knew her in passing, she might have seemed like someone solitary, someone easy to misjudge or overlook. It was this quiet vulnerability, the kind even Darian herself may not have noticed, that placed her unknowingly at the center of lives far more complicated than her own. The tragedy is that Darian never knew the people she sought comfort from. The very people she turned to in moments of confusion were unintentionally holding the pieces that would lead to her downfall. Each name in her circle carried its own story, its own secrets. And those secrets, once placed together, became the answer to the case's most haunting question. Before the Acme Valley was shaken by that devastating discovery, no one, not even Darian, understood that she was standing at the intersection of three individuals, three mindsets, three paths pulling in different directions. She had only been trying to live, to stay steady in a world that kept shifting beneath her, and that is what makes her story all the more heartbreaking. Darian was never a figure of darkness. She was a young woman trying to find her small, stubborn bit of light. On April 4, 2020, Washington was still covered in a thin layer of morning mist when Darian left home. The South Fork Park area, in the Acme Valley, was where she had arranged to meet Peyton at around 7 o'clock in the morning. It was a quiet, semi-rural stretch where a dirt road wound through rows of trees, disturbed only by birdsong and the occasional passing car. Darian was not alone. Her friend Malachi went with her, partly to talk, partly so she could use the Wi-Fi from his phone. To Malachi, the meeting seemed ordinary enough, but to Darian, it carried both hope and unease. She still believed that Peyton, despite everything they had weathered, would never hurt her. That belief would later become one of the case's most haunting questions. At about 7:10 in the morning, Peyton's white pickup appeared at the end of the road. Inside were three people: Peyton in the passenger seat, Tyler in the back, and Brent, someone Darian barely knew, behind the wheel. When the truck stopped, nothing seemed unusual at first glance. A brief meeting, a few greetings, a few sidelong glances, only noticeable to someone paying close attention. Darian stepped toward the truck, and Peyton cracked the window to speak with her. Their first words were gentle, the kind exchanged by two people with shared history. They had once been close, once understood each other in ways that felt rare. Yet beneath that familiar surface was a tension, without a name, a quiet strain Malachi could sense, even from a distance, in the way Peyton kept shifting his gaze. Then the air shifted. Within seconds, the conversation slipped out of its calm rhythm. Malachi could not hear the words, but he saw Peyton lean forward, saw Darian move closer, saw her reach toward the truck with a look caught somewhere between worry and urgency. Something had changed, a sudden turn that left Malachi with a sharp, sinking intuition that something was wrong. The next moments unfolded like a film sequence played too fast. Brent, still behind the wheel, suddenly started the truck. It lurched forward slightly, just enough to make Darian reach instinctively for the edge of the door. Her hair lifted in the breeze, her expression flickering with surprise and concern. Malachi, standing only a few steps away, could do nothing but watch as the scene turned into a string of images he could not piece together. He saw Darian gripping the doorframe, trying to steady herself. The truck began to move slowly at first, but enough to turn the situation dangerous. No one shouted. No one demanded it stop. There was only the restless motion of the truck and Darian's desperate effort not to be left behind on that isolated road. Gravel clicked beneath the tires, blending with the low rumble of the engine. Malachi recalled that the truck did not stay in a straight line. It swayed slightly left, then right, as if the driver were rattled or trying to shake something loose. Each sway created a jolt that forced Darian to hold on with all her strength. In the muted morning light, her silhouette leaned with the movement of the truck, then snapped back again. Malachi stood frozen. Everything stretched thin in the air, the pull between the truck's momentum and Darian's struggle to keep her grip. Then, in one misaligned instant, she lost her hold. A gap opened between her hands and the truck as it moved away. Her body shifted toward the road, while the vehicle continued forward without slowing. Malachi reeled. He stood there, swallowed by the suffocating quiet of the moment, until instinct pushed him to turn and run from what he had just witnessed. One thought pounded in his mind. He needed to leave before everything grew worse. From a distance, the truck's engine faded as it pulled farther away. Behind it, Darian remained on the road, a single, irreversible moment that investigators would spend days trying to reconstruct. And that was only the beginning. Because when that truck sped out of South Fork Park, it carried 3 statements, 3 stories, 3 secrets waiting to be stripped apart, all of them pointing toward a truth none of them could escape. At about 8 o'clock in the morning, not even 1 hour after the pickup had driven away, the Acme Valley still lay under the quiet hush typical of Washington's outskirts. 2 people, walking their dogs, a couple who lived near the park, were the first to notice that something was wrong. From a distance, they saw the shape of a person on the gravel road. At first, they assumed it was someone fainted or having a medical emergency. But as they drew closer, the unease tightened. There was no movement, no sounds of pain, no sign of life. The woman, trembling, pulled out her phone and called 911, her voice breaking with alarm. We see a young woman lying in the road. She is unresponsive. Please send someone right away. Within a few minutes, the first patrol car from the Whatcom Police Department arrived at South Fork Park. A young officer stepped out and approached the scene with caution. The morning stillness felt suddenly heavy, as if the air were holding back something unsaid. From his vantage, the body on the ground did not read like an ordinary traffic accident. There were no long skid marks, no signs that a vehicle had swerved to avoid impact. Instead, there was the sense that someone had left in haste, leaving behind a scene suspended in absolute silence. He crouched to check for breath and pulse. There was nothing. The silence immediately raised a stark question. How did this happen in a place so isolated? As he scanned the perimeter, certain small but odd details caught his eye. The body's position felt unnatural. A few personal items were scattered nearby. Wheel tracks were clearly imprinted on the road, and, notably, a phone not belonging to the person lay a short distance away. None of it fit the pattern of a simple accident. He radioed dispatch and requested investigators and the forensic team to respond without delay. This was no longer a routine medical call. It bore the marks of something far more complicated. Standing there, looking down the mist-softened road, he understood one thing sharply. The traces here told more than the last few minutes. They hid the secrets of hours that had already passed. To unravel them, they would have to follow every small clue from the abandoned phone to the path taken by the 3 men in the white pickup who had left the scene not long before. The moment the forensic team arrived, the atmosphere at South Fork Park shifted into a different grade of tension. The wheel tracks, the position of the body, and the abandoned phone formed 3 blurred focal points that any seasoned investigator would recognize. This situation could not be closed with a hurried conclusion, and so the investigation began to unfold in many directions at once. Police first went to the last person recorded as being with Darian, Malachi Dexter, the friend who accompanied her that morning. He was brought to the station for an interview. In the small interview room, the white light sharpened the strain on Malachi's face. He told them he had gone with Darian to the park so she could meet an old acquaintance. When the white pickup arrived, he believed it was nothing more than an ordinary meeting. But within minutes, the mood shifted so palpably that he sensed trouble even from a distance. Malachi's statement contained key fragments. Darian approached the vehicle with caution, but not with panic. The 3 men in the truck all knew each other, though not all of them were familiar to Darian. The vehicle departed in an unusual manner, amid a short-lived chaos that he could not fully explain. Most crucially, Malachi confirmed Darian had not come on her own. She had been invited. That point became the opening to a cascade of later interviews. The phone left near the scene was quickly sent to the digital unit. Even before a deep forensic grab, a simple wake revealed one fact at once. This was not Darian's phone. The device was registered to Malachi Dexter. That matched his account, Darian had borrowed the phone earlier for Wi-Fi. But the phone's presence at the scene, while Malachi had fled the spot before things unfolded, raised immediate questions. When had the phone been dropped? How did it end up there? Had anyone handled it after the incident? From the device, investigators extracted call logs, location history, message exchanges between Malachi and Darian prior to the meet, and the Wi-Fi data she had used to communicate. Those data helped sketch the circle of people involved, and one name rose to prominence: Peyton Morian. The Acme Valley is not dense with public cameras, but there are many private surveillance eyes on houses and farms along the roads. Police methodically checked each property, each driveway, each stretch of roadway. Then, a crucial set of images emerged. Several cameras captured the white pickup moving at times consistent with Malachi's account. One camera showed the truck passing the narrow road by the park. Another captured the truck swaying slightly on a curve. A different angle showed 3 occupants inside. Investigators set aside the question of why for the moment and focused on who. The driver, a middle-aged man with gray hair identified as Brent Gerber, 47 years old. The front passenger, a lanky young man who had met with Darian Peyton Morian, someone Darian knew. The back seat, the remaining younger man, Tyler O'Keefe, Peyton's childhood friend. So the question came into sharper focus. Why were all 3 present there? Darian had come to meet one person, yet 3 men were in the truck. That discrepancy pushed the inquiry onto a new level. As the forensic examination proceeded, details started to illuminate. Findings recorded included vehicle movement, traces around Darian's location, ground rolling directions that matched the camera footage, and notably, 2 small marks on the victim that drew investigators' attention, consistent with contact from a device. No one rushed to a conclusion, but it became clear there had been interaction with another person or object before the truck left. Alongside that, the forensic team collected microparticle samples from clothing, shoe and tire impressions, DNA from items Darian carried, and fingerprints from the abandoned phone belonging to Malachi. These elements did not tell a complete narrative, but they pointed in one unmistakable direction. Darian had not been alone that morning. When investigators mapped the connections between Darian and Peyton, they found they had known each other for a period. They still exchanged contact from time to time, and the morning meeting was confirmed by message exchanges. Checking Peyton and Tyler's records, one detective observed, "We are not looking at strangers. They grew up together." The data showed moments of downward slides and shared difficulties in their lives. Brent, the man driving, had no close tie to Darian. Yet, he had appeared at the exact critical moment. That produced a fresh question. What role did these 3 men play by being there? Random coincidence? Or something arranged? The probe widened into each man's past. Peyton had prior involvement related to substance issues. Tyler had juvenile history linked to theft. Brent had been the subject of inquiries in several minor matters that had not resulted in convictions. None carried a headline-grabbing criminal record, but layered against the morning's events. All of these histories became pieces that required careful scrutiny. As authorities summoned them in turn, the 3 men offered divergent accounts. One said he was merely along for the ride. Another claimed ignorance of what had occurred. A third appeared disoriented, insisting everything happened too quickly. But the cameras did not seem confused. The forensic traces showed no hesitation. The phone data did not hide. And those facts forced investigators to a sober conclusion. One of the 3, or perhaps all 3, was withholding part of the truth. When the statements from the 3 men began to conflict, police realized the overall picture was no longer a simple case. And just as investigators were preparing to summon Peyton for a second interview, they received unexpected news. Peyton Morian had disappeared. No one had seen him since the morning of April 4th. His family said he left home for a moment, friends claimed Peyton just wanted some quiet, and his phone had been powered off since the previous night. His disappearance shifted the weight of suspicion squarely onto him, and the manhunt officially began. Through transaction records and accounts from people who had encountered Peyton, police discovered he had visited several relatives' homes, gathering clothes, cash, and attempting to borrow a car from an acquaintance. Although hardly a sophisticated escape plan, Peyton's constant movement made it difficult for investigators to pinpoint his location. The Whatcom County Sheriff's Office coordinated with local departments in nearby towns. They reviewed traffic cameras, accessed Peyton's older location data, and interviewed anyone who had been in contact with him in the past 72 hours. A photo of Peyton was released in a statewide alert. Meanwhile, the investigative team continued assembling the case, analyzing each conflicting statement, collecting additional optical traces from the scene, reviewing Peyton's social media accounts and contact lists. All of it was preparation for the next step: filing criminal charges. On April 10, 2020, exactly 1 week after the incident, in a small house in Maple Falls, Peyton was located while hiding at a relative's home. There was no resistance, only a tired expression as the handcuffs clicked shut. Soon after, both Tyler O'Keefe and Brent Gerber were also taken into custody for further questioning. In the interview room, 3 men told 3 different stories. But this time, investigators had enough data to cross-check and dismantle every inconsistency. Each admission, each pause, was documented carefully for the charging file. When the last pieces aligned, police forwarded the full case file to the prosecutor's office. Forensic evidence, camera footage, cross-reference statements, collected physical exhibits, and the investigative conclusions. The prosecutor requested minor supplemental inquiries, but within a few days, the complete case file was finalized. From here, the Darian Sather case stepped into a new phase: the courtroom phase, where justice would be tasked with answering every unresolved question. When the completed case file was delivered to the prosecutor's office, the Darian Sather case officially entered the trial phase. The first hearing opened in a heavy, solemn atmosphere. In the gallery, Darian's family sat quietly, many still unable to accept that a 21-year-old young woman with dreams left unfinished had lost her life on what should have been an ordinary morning. The court reviewed the statements of the 3 defendants one by one: Peyton Morian, Tyler O'Keefe, and Brent Gerber. Each man offered a different version of events, but physical evidence, camera footage, and forensic reports made it impossible for the broader picture to be distorted any further. The prosecutor laid out the facts clearly. All 3 men were present at the time of the incident. The pickup left the scene in a direction consistent with the tire tracks discovered, and markings found on Darian's body aligned with a device owned by one of the defendants. In the courtroom, as each recorded clip was played, as each message exchange was read aloud, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. Defense attorneys attempted to highlight the defendant's instability, the confusion caused by psychological stress, even suggesting this might have been an unintended accident. But those arguments were quickly dismantled by the chain of tightly connected evidence. In the end, all 3 defendants were found responsible for the death of Darian Sather. Peyton Morian received the highest sentence, followed by Tyler and Brent, whose sentences were lower but still severe. The trial closed in a silence so sharp it felt physical. No one had won, because the greatest loss had already taken place long before, on the morning of April 4, 2020. Darian's passing is a wound that cannot be measured. In the courtroom, as the verdict was read, her mother gave only a small nod, as if she had prepared herself, yet her heart fractured all over again. The loss did not remain confined to the quiet courtroom. It rippled outward, touching family, friends, and the small community where she had lived her 21 years. Darian was never just a statistic in a crime report. She was a young woman with hopes, with a mix of good and flawed choices, with moments of confusion but also the desire to find her way back. Her story reminds us that behind every case, there are not only offenders and victims, but also lives shattered and loved ones left to carry a pain that may never fully heal. This case also reflects a harsh truth. Danger does not always come from strangers. It can rise from the very relationships we trust most. Darian met with Peyton because they had once known each other, because she believed he would never harm her. Yet, that trust placed her in the most vulnerable position of all. There are warning signs we often overlook: instability in a relationship, new acquaintances who make us uneasy, promises that never align with actions. When combined, these small red flags can form the early outline of a much larger threat. Darian's story leaves behind a bitter but necessary reminder: listen to your instincts. Seek help when unease grows, and be cautious with choices that may lead you into danger. Justice has finally arrived, but the cost was unbearably high. A future, a life, forever halted on a mist-covered gravel road in the Acme Valley.